Hey y'all, another teaching break video coming at you from Amanda. Glad you're here with me for another, hopefully less than 5 minutes, little devotional that I've been thinking about. I'm not sure if you're like me, but I've gotten to watch Frozen 2 a lot in the last few days because it's on Disney Plus and we're stuck at home and my boys love it. So one of the lines that Elsa says is that fear is what cannot be trusted. And when I heard that, like 10 days in a row, it really started to sink into my brain that that's a lot of what's going on right now. There's a lot of fear of not getting the right facts, fear of getting the virus, fear of supplies being limited, fear of our family members being sick or being able to not see them, and just fear, a lot of fear of the unknown, and maybe even fear of death. And so when she said that, I thought, okay, let's go to the Bible and see what the Bible tells us about fear, because any reaction we have initially is not wrong in itself. It's what we do with that reaction. And so in the New Testament, a lot we're told that fear is something that we need to work through and replace with other feelings of the confidence and hope that we have in Jesus and in God's providence and how He's providing for us and securing our future and how He's already won the victory. So, a few points for you of things that I thought about when I heard that phrase, fear is what cannot be trusted, because that's kind of a biblical concept. So let's start with just this idea that instead of being angry or hopeless or frustrated, all of those things come out of fear, or even just a little bit grumpy about the circumstances or how you think things are being handled. How can we change our minds to be more Christ like in the face of fear, whatever it is that you're fearful of? And so here's a few things that we might be fearful of that we can think differently about. The first one is a changing world. This world is changing like never before. We're on lockdown. We have had freedoms removed. We've been asked to give up things, to do things that it's a different world, and that can be scary for us, especially when we're older. We're used to certain things, and so of course the first verse that I thought of was in Ecclesiastes, where it says, "There's nothing new under the sun." Our God has seen all of this before. All of this is something that can be worked into His plan. This is nothing new. Sickness and disease, governments that are in upheaval, people being divided over what to do. God has seen all this before. And even though there seems like there's a lot of darkness, He can do work and does some of His best work in those situations. And so we need to trust Him in a changing world. Instead of being fearful, we can go back and read throughout the Old Testament where He provided in times when it looked really bleak for His people. God stepped up in ways we wouldn't even expect and said, "Trust me, hope in me, and remember, I've already won the victory." Jesus has come. He's already won the victory over all of this. And so a changing world is going to be part of where we live. And what we have to remember is our God is unchanging in His faithfulness, His steadfastness, and His promise to deliver on that victory in the end. So another thing that we might be fearful of is being alone. And I want to mention that only to say I want to do another devotion on that soon, on being fearful of being alone or isolated and things like that. So hold on to that thought if that's one that you thought of, and I want to come back to that in its own video. Another one that I see a lot right now is being fearful of people who look different than we do, who talk differently, who live differently, who all of those things, somebody who is just different than us in some way. And I think that, especially in this day and age, it's very easy to let that become a divisive part of our lives. Depending on what you watch, what you read, who you listen to, it's easy for that sin of seeing people as less than or as different in a bad way. It's easy to let that creep in. And I call it sin because it is. We need to see people, all people, as, I'm going to try to say this right, Imago Dei, which is made in the image of God. We all have a soul that was crafted and created by God and built for eternity. And we have let too many things come between us seeing our fellow humans as made in the image of God. And I want to let that sink in for a minute. We are all created, no matter what our skin color, our circumstance in life, no matter what we have done in our past, no matter what circumstances we're living in currently, everyone is welcome to come to Jesus as they are. And that's what I think we need to remember. You think about the people Jesus associated with. Yes, he was Jesus, but he's whose example we're supposed to follow. They were welcome to come to him. And as they came to him, he worked on their hearts and changed their lives. And so I think we need to take a hard look at how we are looking at people, speaking about people, the things that we're watching that are influencing our hearts, about how we think about people. And we need to stop putting buts in front of our senses. Well, yes, of course I see them in God's image, but. And we need to be really careful about that, because that's not what I saw Jesus doing. And he loved a whole host of people. And so that kind of brings me to my last point, which is we might be afraid of political systems that are changing. We might be afraid of death and disease and all of these things. So how do we overcome that? Well, First John tells us that love casts out fear. Another frozen point I just realized now was that love is what conquers fear. So from First John 4, I'm going to start in verse 13. By this we know that we abide in him and he in us, because he has given us his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son, God abides in him and he in God. So we have come to know and to believe that the love God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Boy, I want that, don't you? I want to love like God loved. I want to love like Jesus loved. By this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment, because he is so also are we in the world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. So we have to be careful. Our heart needs work. If we are constantly fearful of things, then we are not abiding in the love of God, because it says it casts out those things. If you are loving the way God does, you're going to be bearing the fruit of the Spirit. Joy, we already said love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Are you treating everyone in your life that way? No matter what, are we bearing fruit in our relationships, loving like Jesus? Because that's how we get rid of fear. We look at people, we see them the way that God does, made in his image. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother or sister, whom he can see, does not love his brother whom he has seen, cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have: whoever loves God must also love his brother and sister. So there you go. Some thoughts on fear. We may have some work to do. I know I do, in changing my heart from going to a place of fear initially to a place of love and service and being Christ-like in that attitude. So my prayer for you today is that you'll take a deep breath, and maybe when you see something or hear something that causes you to be fearful, instead of holding on to that fear, that you'll be able to go to a place in your heart to pray that the Spirit will help you to break that down, get rid of the things that don't belong, get rid of any sin that's attached to the ways you may be feeling, and seek to show love and grace and mercy in the same way that Jesus did to everyone around us, especially during this time. Love and blessings today. See y'all next time.